state was, you know what, they can go around, smile, shake people's hands, but we're going to be running it out of the Oval Office. So again, you can read, Anne Applebaum's Twilight of Democracy 3 or 4 years ago, and what she said was, what you do is, if you want to disable the state, the quote deep state, however you want to put it, what you do is you undermine agencies by replacing competency with loyalty. That's part one. But part two, there is a real belief that in Trump world, that it's like Louis the 14th who said, "I am the state." That is the attitude. Trump is the state. And so he wants to know why. If you look at these picks, why do I need competence? We're going to be running it all out of the Oval Office, which, of course, for many Americans, 49.1 or 2% of Americans, that's deeply troubling.
Yeah, I mean, I'm most concerned if we're talking in terms of Anne's, brilliant focus on how liberal democracy becomes illiberal democracy, the sort of the Hungarian Viktor Orban model that is so beloved of many around Trump. I'm most concerned by Peter Hegseth. Trump's real complaint about the Pentagon in 2020 was that it resisted Mark Esper, Mark Milley. They resisted the Insurrection Act. They resisted the politicization of the military. And Trump came out of that saying, "I was betrayed by the military. They did not swear an oath of loyalty to me. They kept saying their oath of loyalty was to the Constitution." Well, Pete Hegseth fully agrees with Trump. He thinks it's a woke DEI, politically correct organization, the Pentagon, that needs to be cleaned out, and that people, 3-4-star generals, need to be vetted to check their loyalty to the commander-in-chief, not in the abstract, to this one. Mm-hmm. And as you know, there are certain people like the FBI director, who I think, Chris Wray, who I think Trump probably does want to remove and, God forbid, replace with somebody like Kash Patel. But there are protections for a lot of these jobs. There are certain fixed contracts. For generals, there aren't. You can get rid of them as commander-in-chief. You can get rid of them for whatever reason you like, and you can promote a corporal. If you find that corporal more congenial, you can just have them leapfrog several levels and become generals based on their loyalty to you. And that's Pete Hegseth's role, I think. And that's the most worrying, therefore, to the future of the rule of law in this republic.
It's interesting. The Wall Street Journal editorial page today says, basically talking to Donald Trump, says, sometimes it's okay to withdraw an impulsive nomination, a choice. And they're talking about Pete Hegseth asking, what else is out there? If he didn't tell you about this, what more is to come down the road? We'll see. Let's turn to NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns. Dasha, good morning. So we know that in addition to the phone calls that President-elect Trump has been making to senators, that the incoming vice president, J.D. Vance, will be on the Hill today talking to his colleagues about these cabinet picks, trying to whip together some votes. What more do we know about that?
Yeah, so publicly, Willie, President-elect Trump doesn't show any sign of wavering with any of these controversial picks. If he has been putting pressure on senators, J.D. Vance will be on the Hill kind of trying to shepherd these folks along, a bit of a charm offensive, a bit of a pressure offensive. And with some of these picks, Willie, look at Linda McMahon, for example, the Department of Education. So critical, and it's a department that Trump has said he wants to dismantle. He can very quickly dismantle certain aspects of Biden's push here. For example, student loan debt cancellation, that can go away pretty instantly. Title IX protections for LGBTQ students, that can be nixed pretty quickly. And he's looking to implement universal school choice. And NBC News has been doing an analysis of how much the picks that Trump has been looking at have been donating. Linda McMahon donated upwards of $20 million to his campaign this election cycle. We also have Chris Wright, who's at the Department of Energy, who's a big donor. Howard Lutnick, who just got Commerce, he's a huge donor. The folks that are being looked at for Treasury, Scott Bessent and Mark Rowan, also major donors. And that pick we're still waiting on. There was a bit of an internal knife fight between Lutnick and Bessent that kind of scrambled that decision. So we're still waiting to see what President-elect Trump does there. And then, of course, Elon Musk donated millions and millions of dollars and now has the president's ear. We've been reporting that there's some internal friction over that. One source telling me that Musk is acting as if he's, quote, co-president and making sure everyone knows it. Another source telling me that he has an opinion on anything and everything, and that he's starting to feel to the inner circle of Trump world that he's overstepping, that he's overstaying his welcome a little bit.
Getting the big head.
There's some speculation that bromance might start to fade.
Getting the big head.
Trump is used to sharing, is not used to sharing the spotlight. One source telling me that in Trump world, if you want sustainability, you gotta know when to make yourself scarce, and Musk hasn't quite figured that out yet, but is certainly trying to have a lot of impact on these picks.
Yeah, no, he has not made himself scarce.
No, that event the other night at Mar-a-Lago, Donald Trump said, jokingly, half jokingly, I can't get rid of this guy. Right. We were talking about Elon Musk. NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns. Dasha, great reporting as always. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Coming up, a look at some of the other stories making headlines, including one involving our own parent company, how Comcast is planning some big moves when it comes to its cable channels like ours. That's straight ahead on Morning Joe.
I wasn't even allowed on a minor radio station, much less a big outfit like that. They announced me as me being a charlatan right away here in Northwest Tennessee, to the point that didn't nobody want to have anything to do with the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, even though everything that I was telling them the truth about, regarding biblical Bible prophecy, regarding the opening of the seals, regarding Satan being the second seal, the false prophet being the third seal, the actual Antichrist being the fourth seal. Because they'd already made it up in their minds that either A, I was a charlatan, or B, they had already been misled in their teachings, their schooling, and because somebody had opposed the idea that the first seal was going to be some sort of a false prophet or some sort of a fraudulent imposter of some sort, rather than them admit that they had believed the wrong thing, they rather hold on to a lie and let people like myself suffer. That's basically what they've done to the Lord Jesus Christ. They was not going to believe anything that Jesus was teaching them at the time that he was with us on the planet Earth, and that's the reason why his own people basically rejected him, because they thought that he was nothing but a charlatan. You remember whenever Christ said, for what good work dost thou persecute me for? This was after he'd already went through his beating. This was, I think, after that they'd already placed a crown of thorns on top of his head that sunk into his skull, that caused blood to go down his face and his neck and back of his head and stuff. For what good work dost thou persecute me for? And one of the guards said, for a good work we persecute you not. But for you claiming to be something that we know that you're not, that's what we're persecuting you for. We know that you're not who you say that you are. You're a charlatan. And because of it, we're going to kill you. And of course, whenever his own people kept telling the great Pharaoh at that time, Pontius Pilate, away with him, he was caught in between the middle of realizing that this man didn't deserve to be punished this way, especially a capital punishment, but yet now he was stuck in the middle towards the people, basically could overthrow him. So he washed his hands and went ahead and permitted for the people's will to be done. Now, you don't think that person, that politician, you don't think that politician is going to be held accountable for that one day, even though he washed his hands? He may have washed his hands towards trying to free his own guilt pertaining to his consciousness, but whenever it comes to the consciousness of God, do you really think that God's just going to let that man go loose pertaining to him taking a part in that he could have stopped the crucifixion of Christ, but chose not to, as far as dereliction of duty? I don't think so. I think he'll be held just as accountable as those that was saying away with him, away with him, away with him, because like I said, they was falsely judging Christ by believing at that time that he was a charlatan, that he was a liar, that he was a false prophet. But they found out later, after he died, during his actual death, that rattled a great deal of people that night, or that day, that afternoon. And then 3 days later, whenever he rose from the tomb, they found out later that he was not just somebody out here blabbing off a bunch of stuff to try to get a bunch of people to believe in. That he was who he said that he was, towards him being the Son of God. And I guess it's probably going to, in a lot of people's eyes,
and news channels, including
it's going to take the hereafter in the final judgment of me being able to tell people, you see there, I told you that I received a spiritual crown of thorns, that the angels of God come down and done what they done. I met this man over Martin, Tennessee, pertaining to the Saudi Arabian prince at the time, our king at the time, pertaining to what went on, pertaining to Satan in the flesh. See there, I told you that I was not lying to you, and that's going to be, I guess, the only time that I'm going to be exonerated, liberated, pertaining to what has went on here, because there's no doubt that they have abandoned it or just never taken a part in believing in the things that I was telling them about. So whenever they talk about this concept of the false prophet and the Antichrist and the two witnesses and Satan in the flesh and the Antichrist in the flesh and the false prophet in the flesh and basically the biblical Bible prophecies, I tend to wonder that the majority of them are full of, you know what, because from what I can see out of them for the past 35 years, they've went in a direction toward just the very opposite.
Figured out now how to make streaming profitable. Peacock had an extraordinary success in the Olympics. So they're talking about spinning this off. Comcast still owns, I think Brian Roberts still owns a third of that. And because Comcast didn't jump into the bidding war like everybody else, throwing stupid money at streaming services and then watch it flop, Comcast has a ton of cash. So now they spin this off and they're in a position to what do you all say? To get a lot of chat, to get a lot of different consolidate, but also to just ramp up. And so you get a lot of people, a lot of different channels together. And so whatever that entity is going to be, there'll probably be a lot of cable channels, and they'll be in a much better position to scale it. I took one business class at University of Alabama.
Thanks for that.
I didn't get up.
I'm glad you gave us your analysis.
The only thing that makes sense here is you spin it off, and then you scale it up, and then you figure out how to make it more profitable.
Yeah, this is to keep these networks like this network healthy and to keep Comcast thriving the way it is. And this is just the way it's going. People are cutting the cord, right? The cable subscribers are down across the board. This is something Bob Iger talked about last year doing with ABC and Disney and spinning off some of the networks. We'll see if he does that as well. But I think internally it's viewed as a good thing. It gets everyone in a healthy position to continue to thrive moving forward.
All right, let's move on. Newly released data is offering insight on the deadly cost of America's Civil War based on recently revealed census records from the 1880s. Researchers have landed on a firmer estimate of the number of lives lost in the conflict, 698,000. The analysis suggests Confederate states suffered a death rate more than twice as high as the Union. Historians have long grappled with the true number of casualties. And Alec Baldwin's Western movie Rust will be revealed to the public today at an international film festival in Poland. It comes 3 years after the on-set death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. High demand for tickets to the premiere caused the website to crash. Hutchins was killed when a prop gun handled by Baldwin was discharged during production. Coming up, first long-range missiles and now landmines. President Biden is signing off on Ukraine's use of another weapon aimed at slowing Russia's advance. Retired Admiral James Stavridis weighs in next on Morning Joe.
That war over in Ukraine, that's just a open sore that could go on for the next 100 years. I said it could. I hope to God that it don't. I hope it ends tomorrow. Hope it ends today. Just like all the conflict over there in the Middle East. I hope it ends. It's not a pleasurable thing in watching people suffer and basically butcher one another apart rather than get along and build a future together. Well, if that ain't primitive, I don't know what is.
Let's turn now to Ukraine. Several developments out of that country this morning. Right now, the U.S. Embassy in the capital of Kyiv is shut down as it warns of a potentially significant aerial attack. In a post on social media, the State Department is warning American citizens be prepared to immediately shelter in the event an air alert is announced. This comes a day after Ukraine fired long-range ATACMS missiles into Russia for the first time. That's according to 2 U.S. officials who spoke to NBC News. Russia's defense ministry confirms 5 of 6 missiles were shot down over a region that borders northern Ukraine. The 6th was struck in midair and its fragments landed on a military facility, causing a fire. Meanwhile, President Biden reportedly has authorized the provision of anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine, that for the first time, changing his own policy. Joining us now, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, retired 4-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. He's Chief International Analyst for NBC News. He authored a new piece for Bloomberg titled, "Ukraine and Russia Can Find Peace with a DMZ." Admiral, great to have you with us at the table as always. We'll get to your piece in just a minute, but let's talk about those ATACMS that President Biden has now said, Ukraine, go ahead and use them. How does that change the dynamic in the war?
Yeah, let's do it tactically, operationally, strategically. So tactically, this is going to have real impact immediately. I don't believe the Russian Ministry of Defense, I think those missiles probably had immediate tactical impact. They were used against ammunition sites and the staging areas, Willie, for the North Korean troops. Operationally, this is going to force Putin to kind of spread his forces a little more thinly, to worry more about his logistics hubs, and to prepare to conduct air defense, something he hasn't had to do in significant ways. That's a cost on his military. And then strategically, what I think the Biden team is about, and it's a smart play, is to give Volodymyr Zelensky as many chips for the bargaining table as he can possibly have. He's holding a chunk of Russia around Kursk. Here's another bargaining chip, ATACMS missiles. So I think there are implications in all domains.
This war just crossed the 1,000-day mark, and there are a lot of people who say it would have been nice for Ukraine to have had these ATACMS a year ago, a year and a half ago. What do you think?
I'd substitute for the word ATACMS, F-16s. Would have been great to have those a year ago. A-1 tanks, substitute. Would have been great to have those 2 years ago. We've been always slightly behind. I understand the theory that you don't want to provoke a nuclear armed power, Willie. Got it. On the other hand, we've seen it again and again. Putin has failed to respond to his own so-called red lines.
So let's take bigger picture here. This is this White House trying to rush as much help as it can to Ukraine because the clock is ticking. They know when Donald Trump takes office on January 20th, U.S. policy towards Kyiv likely going to change dramatically. So we talked about the ATACMS, the landmines, a controversial choice to be sure. What else can be done, realistically can be done between now and January 20th?
I think at this point, the short answer is so often Plan B is to work harder on Plan A. And what I mean by that is in the remaining 60 days or so, put all your force behind the logistics, get as much of this kit to the battlefield, get as much support to the commander of U.S. European Command, my successor, also Supreme Allied Commander General Chris Cavoli. Load him up, he'll get it moving, get as much of it in train as you can, and see where the Trump administration actually lands.
You know, Admiral, we are clearly in a transition period here in between administrations.
Yeah.
Everything you've been talking about and responding to the questions here this morning has to do with the Defense Department, the reach, the power, the immense impact of the Defense Department, both on the United States reputation around the globe and on a daily basis around the globe. What's your view of the furor that has erupted over the potential successor as Secretary of Defense?
Let me make an initial point, Mike, which is all around the world, forward deployed soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, this is all white noise to them, to be honest. They are focused on their operational tasks. So we were joking before the call. You asked me, what would it be like to be out on an aircraft carrier right now in command? It would be wonderful. Because no one out there, believe me, is following all this. Having said that, the Department of Defense needs experience at its helm. And so anytime you are putting a candidate forward who doesn't have the requisite experience, you are going to end up in a place where the department will move less, with less alacrity. It will move with less spirit. Therefore, in the end, even though those operational forces are not following this, they are going to be impacted by it, whoever ends up leading that department.
Ed Luce has a question for you. And Ed, really quickly, I'm curious, what is NATO's response? What is Britain's response to Joe Biden and the administration giving Ukraine more weapons and strike deeper into Russia?
Well, Britain, countries like Britain and Poland have been pushing quite hard for the Americans to do that. Britain has its own Storm Shadow. It's an Anglo-French artillery that also has a longer range, and those have been lifted, but it required American permission to do so. So that this also affects those. I mean, I'm fascinated, Admiral, by the leverage this gives an incoming Donald Trump to persuade Putin to come to the negotiating table, because right now he's showing no signs of interest in bargaining with Zelensky, because he thinks he's gaining more on the ground, and why give up, why freeze? Does this make Putin think again? Is this in effect a gift from Biden to Trump to get these talks started after January the 20th?
You could look at it that way, Ed. I like to think it's a gift from Biden to Zelensky, who is going to have to go to that negotiating table. You know, Mika read that interesting piece about the massive casualties in the American Civil War. That's the other piece of the puzzle for Vladimir Putin. He's lost 200,000 killed in action, 400,000 who are grievously wounded, 600,000 who have left the country to avoid the draft. He is now approaching Civil War-like levels of casualties. It's a terrifying thing, in my view, if you are a member of the Russian population. So I think between the bargaining chips, you're absolutely right. The chunk of territory that the Ukrainians hold of Russia, the new ATACMS, the F-16s, which are starting to have real impact. Those are operational military bargaining chips. On the other side of it is going to be casualties inflicted on Russia. Those two things, I think, might help get Putin to the bargaining table.
And I want to ask you really quickly about the cost of this war on Russia. We know on Ukraine, obviously, because we see it every day. But, you know, the Biden administration's been criticized by both sides, whether it's the isolationists on the right and the left, or whether it's the people who, you know, basically wanting to march, you know, have Ukraine march into Moscow. He's always been hammered, second guessed. He's always had to worry. And as James Baker always said, president's first goal, avoiding nuclear war. And after that, then you figure everything else out. But I just want us to look at how will history 20, 30 years from now look at this war thus far and how much it has decimated the number two, and they are, Russia, the number two military in the world. What is the generational impact of the casualties and the equipment they have lost over the past several years?
It is massive, and we are only seeing the edges of it right now. And think about the 600,000 young Russian males who have left the country. Who are they? They're the ones with internet savvy, rubles in their pocket, contacts in the West. They've now seen the bright lights of Warsaw. They're not coming back. And that is a generational loss for the Russians. Point two.
By the way, you just made Mika's brother smile talking about the bright lights of Warsaw.
No, old Warsaw is beautiful.
Oh my gosh, are you
gorgeous.
kidding? It's gorgeous.
Have you been to the Bristol?
I have.
Okay,
Oh my gosh, it's so nice.
We'll have Fromer's tour of old Warsaw.
Krakow?
Okay, here
Come
we
on.
go. Okay, we opened up Pandora's box. Go ahead.
And beautifully
Or Brzezinski's
rebuilt
box.
after the tragedy of the Second
Yes,
World War.
yes.
There's a message there.
Yes.
But here's the point I would make to Donald Trump about the money we could spend on Ukraine. We're talking $40 billion a year, which is about 5% of the U.S. defense budget. Our defense budget, $800 billion, $40 billion, about 5%. For that amount of money, we are breaking the phalanx of Russia's military. And those are the best dollars we have ever spent in defense. And point two, all that money, that $40 billion a year, that's not a check we're handing Zelensky. All that money is paid to U.S. defense contractors, making our defense industrial base stronger. Russia gets weaker. To Joe's point, final thought, the Russians today are spending 35% of their GDP on defense. That is not a prescription for long-term growth.
Yeah, Willie, this is a generational impact on Russia. And yes, it's helped U.S. businesses.
Yes.
It is, in one word, for President Trump, it's leverage. This is terrific leverage. You put a small amount of money in, and you get massive effect. This is a good deal for the United
So
States.
speaking of the president-elect, Admiral, he said on the campaign trail, I'll have a peace deal done between Russia and Ukraine. It'll take me one day when I become president. You're writing today in Bloomberg about the possibility of that kind of deal, what it might look like, and you say there ought to be some kind of a DMZ like there is between North and South Korea. What would that deal look like for both sides?
It would look a lot like the end of the Korean War, Willie, which is to say a demilitarized zone, DMZ, probably 5 to 10 miles wide. It would probably be right along the border that you see now between Russian forces, Ukrainian forces. And that's a tragedy, right? It's a tragedy that Ukraine would give up 20% of its country. But the other 80% sails on. Democratic, free, eventually a path to NATO, say 3 to 5 years, eventually a path to the EU. Not a terrible outcome. A good portion of making that work would be creation of this demilitarized zone, populated with, on one side, Ukrainian troops, on the other, Russian, like the Korean DMZ, or you could bring in a neutral force, a UN force. You could have NATO on one side, Russia on the other. I could think of a lot of things. All that to be determined at a negotiating table, but it's a key element that people aren't talking
Tragic
about
for
enough.
Ukraine, but let's also say a long way from what Putin wanted when he
That's
set out
exactly
on this
the
war.
point. When Putin wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, when he's honest with himself, he realizes, to Joe's point, he has hurt his country deeply. The
Deeply.
Rodina, the
Deeply.
motherland. He has destroyed its prospects. In a smart world, Putin would have integrated with Europe. Instead, he's created this confrontation by invading a neighbor. It's a tragedy for Ukraine. It's also a tragedy for Russia.
Yes, it
Coming
is.
up, it could be years before Donald Trump is sentenced for his hush money conviction, if it happens at all. MSNBC.
It just goes to show you how poor leadership of the oligarchs over there that thought that they was going to be able to knock out something real quick, and now it's turned into a thousand-day war, soon to be 3 years. He's bringing shame and defeat to his own people. And those, what they say, it was 200,000 that they estimated that was injured severely. You think them people are going to wind up being productive in their country? I doubt it. And whenever it comes to the way that they treat their veterans versus the way that we treat ours, that does wind up getting severely burnt or hurt, blowed up, whatever. They do not treat their military force pertaining to their veterans the way that we do over here in America. Not even close. So, you know, there's a cost for war. There's a cost. I don't care what side that you're on. There's a cost of starting a confrontation like this. And ultimately, in the spiritual war, in the spirit world, Lucifer and his army will find out that what they tried to achieve of an unachievable achievement, they're going to find out that they're going to be sucking hind tit too whenever it comes to the glory of God, that God has actually advanced in what Lucifer has done pertaining to the human structure of gaining that many more people into the heavenly realm pertaining to God's kingdom versus those that God has lost. And the reason why I know this is because whenever it talks about those that didn't accept the mark of the beast 666 during the time of the Great Tribulation period, that the Bible says, for who are these? And it says, well, these are those that has washed their robes white in the Lamb's blood, that refused to take the mark, and they was crying out, how long shall it be, O Lord? How long shall it be till you avenge us? And it talks about how that they should rest yet for a short season. But it says, if you go and read in Revelations, it says that it was as the sands of sea. The sands of the sea. Indicating that it will be a unnumberable amount of people. Amount of people that will realize that they have missed the boat whenever it comes to the crazy Christians that kept talking to them about the Great Tribulation. It kept talking to them about the second coming of Christ. It kept talking to them about that there was no way for you to enter into the kingdom of God other than through the blood and believing in the Lord Jesus Christ. They'll realize that they have missed the boat. So they'll smarten up during that tribulation period of the false prophet and the Antichrist, but during which time it says that it was as the sands of the sea, an innumerable amount of people that was crying out, how long shall it be, O Lord? How long shall it be till you avenge us? And it says that they should rest yet for a short season. I personally have looked at that in a in-tuned way of believing that that short season will basically be will be after that 1,000-year millennium reign that will happen down here on planet Earth, to where every knee will bow and every tongue will profess that Christ is who Christ said that he was. And after that time is whenever the final resurrection will come about. Now, it's possible that they could be resurrected before the 1,000-year millennium, after the 7-year tribulation period, somewhere in between there, because I still believe that there'll be 3 resurrections in total. And of course, the last resurrection is that in which where all will give up its dead, including the sea will give up its dead, according to the Bible. And that will be the great white throne judgment, whenever everybody who was either straddling the fence or those who was debatable and whether or not they was of a godly sort, or those that were just basically plain Antichrist to begin with, those will be the ones that will be given the final last chance after Lucifer is loosed out of his prison to go and deceive the nations once more again in the Gog and Magog, that those people will follow after Lucifer. And of course it says in the Bible that this will be the second death, regarding great fire that come down out of New Jerusalem that basically consumed them. Done away with them. Done away with them as far as their actual existence is pertaining to their souls. And in being separated from God, that in and of itself is hell. That will be everlasting, eternal hell that they will never be able to escape from. Why? Because they chose not the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ regarding the Holy Father. And of course we know what's going to happen to Lucifer, the false prophet, the Antichrist. They themselves will be cast into an eternal furnace where they will suffer immensely, day in, day out, forever and ever and ever. In other words, they will be tormented for what that they have done, because to whom much is given, much is required, and there's more required in the spirit realm than it is the fleshly realm, because of what they done towards challenging the kingdom of God to begin with. As I said a while ago, all these factors will actually be a benefit to the holy eternal kingdom of God, while it will be a disbenefit to the wicked and the demonic. That's pretty powerful. It's pretty strong. I know I just got through saying a mouthful, but I'm telling you right now, that's the way that I have interpreted the Bible. Towards it was as the sands of the sea, crying out under the altar, the souls of them. How long shall it be till you avenge us? And that it was advertised or broadcasted or told that they should rest yet for a short season, until the time of their brethrens also will go through their same fate pertaining to a physical mortal death.
Done. It's already changing the network. I mean, check out what I saw this morning.
Welcome back to Fox and Friend. And now, 6 commercials for My Pillow.
Just different. It's just a little different. That's
What happened, everybody?
That's an empty sound.
All right, welcome to the 4th hour of Morning Joe. It's 6 a.m. on the West Coast, and you know you need to get up now.
Oh.
Go to work. We've been up for many hours just to ask Jonathan Lemire. It's 9 a.m. in the East Coast, and Jonathan Lemire is somehow still with us.
Let me ask you, how do you do that? You're like
Because ours is hard.
from 5 till about in the morning to about 4 in the
We're on
afternoon.
with you at 8 at
straight.
night on the phone.
And we're talking to you at 8 at night. I'm serious. Like, what was your sleep routine?
Not enough, Joe, is
Yeah.
the answer there.
But you're a young man.
I try.
In other words, he's got a residency there. And a lot of people in their careers, they do basically live where they're working at. Maybe not literally, but figuratively, they put a lot of hours in.
I'll be doing very early in the administration is closing up the Department of Education in Washington, D.C., and sending all education and education work and needs back to the states.
McMahon, who served in Trump's first administration, is a former World Wrestling Entertainment executive. It comes as Trump is standing by his embattled choice for Attorney General, now former Congressman Matt Gaetz, offering this one-word answer when asked if he was reconsidering the pick. No. The House Ethics Committee will meet today to weigh whether to release its report on Gaetz that focuses on alleged sexual misconduct and illicit drug use that Gaetz vehemently denies. While House Speaker Mike Johnson opposes the report's release, some Senate Republicans want to see it.
I would like to see our committees do their full job. There needs to be legitimate vetting.
An unidentified hacker was able to gain access to a file containing civil lawsuit depositions of 2 women who have made allegations against Gaetz, according to a source familiar with the matter and an email obtained by NBC News, though it's unclear whether that file has been released. The source says the file includes damaging testimony, including that of a woman who alleges she had sex with Gates when she was 17, and the testimony of a second woman who said she witnessed the 2017 encounter. A representative for Gates did not respond to NBC News' request for comment. Trump also picked Dr. Mehmet Oz to...
Another ambulance chaser. Somebody trying to get something for nothing. I'm not saying that the occurrence didn't happen. I'm not saying that the occurrence shouldn't be
Of the 11th
rectified some way or another. But a lot of these people, they just lay wait for somebody to get in a government position. That way they can throw stones at them. That way they'll try to come out on top of something that occurred sometimes 10, 15, 20 years ago. And according to our statute of limitations, according to our laws here in America, those people are supposed to just be whistling Dixie. But we see what kind of problems that some of these women can create for some of these men. And I'm pretty sure today it's just the very opposite of what a lot of these women have done to various men, that one day whenever they wind up getting on a platform, they'll end up being persecuted too as well. And don't say that it don't happen, because I've heard of many cases where, like, women school teachers have had affairs with young boys 15, 16, 17 years old. And if it don't come out in the wash in the beginning, it will come out in the wash in the end. You can bet your bottom dollar on that, pertaining to the Great White Throne Judgment.
and former MSN.
Unless they repent and get forgiveness from God. That's the only way that their sins will be thrown as far from the east is from the west, and then won't nobody really know the full recourse of that particular soul. But other than that, oh yeah, it'll come out in the end.
Former MSNBC host and contributor to Washington Month.
All right, what we got going on here now? Let's go on. Let's go on. Stop it right. Still talking about this guy's dirty laundry. Let's see what this segment puts on. Hold it right there.
Lobbying very hard for Howard Lutnick to be the Treasury Secretary. He ended up getting Commerce. Talk about that, and then talk about who business owners and people who, CEOs on Wall Street, people who supported Donald Trump, who would they prefer for Treasury Secretary?
Well, look, I think actually the reaction so far from most of Wall Street and corporate America is around Howard Lutnick, which seemed to...
And I want to emphasize on something real quick, even so much as about my own dirty laundry. None of us has a squeaky clean record. I don't care if you was raised up in a bubble somewhere. If you're a human being and you have recourse with other human beings in your life, odds are you've made mistakes. And if you say that you have not made mistakes, basically the truth not be in those people to begin with, because I promise you I've made many mistakes. A lot of them are regrettable mistakes, but I've learned throughout my years that you learn to live with your mistakes. You treat your mistakes as a teacher in learning from your mistakes, and you try not to make the same mistake again. It's a part of your growing process. It's a part of maturity. So if somebody tells you that I'm a saint, or they're a saint, or they've never made these kind of mistakes before, they may not have actually made that particular mistake. But odds are they've probably made several other ones that they're trying to judge off of wouldn't have made. So the bottom line is, we're all guilty. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, is what the Bible says. Now you can take that for what it's worth, but I take it for everything that it's worth, because everybody has made mistakes, including myself.
To be getting a concession prize of sorts in this commerce role was actually, I think, a sense of relief to some extent, because they are hoping that a Kevin Warsh, who used to be one of the deputy governors on the Federal Reserve, might take the role. Mark Rowan, another name, who runs Apollo Group, is now having meetings with President-elect Trump. So I think Wall Street and the corporate America looking more for folks like that to take that role. The question now is whether there could be a sort of good cop, bad cop system that takes place as it relates to sort of the economic program going forward. So, for example, Howard Lutnick is a big proponent of tariffs. He's talked about it very openly and very aggressively. Most of the classic Wall Street folks, the Kevin Warshes of the world, the Mark Rowans of the world, don't have the same kind of appetite for tariffs. And so the question is there some, as I said, some kind of good cop, bad cop system where you're effectively going to use Howard Lutnick to go after tariffs, but the Treasury Secretary doesn't? I don't know how tenable that ultimately is going to be. And I think finding somebody who is acceptable, if you will, to the markets and the global economy, who also is and preferences the idea of tariffs, I think is actually a very hard sort of unicorn to find.
Yeah. Let's talk about Comcast and the networks that we work for.
See, I don't care nothing about all that. Maybe I should. Maybe that's where I made a mistake. Maybe I should have invested more of my time in networks. That way I could have got my message out quicker regarding the promise of peace here upon planet Earth that a great deal of people have been objectionable to. Let's back up just for a second. What is that?
For two of the most powerful jobs in the nation. Also ahead, Ukraine on high alert. The U.S. shutting down its embassy in Kyiv, warning that a major attack by Russia could be imminent. And a bomb cyclone slamming the West Coast. Why it may be one of the worst storms the Pacific Northwest has seen in decades.
I didn't know nothing about that storm coming in. That kind of snuck in. Snuck in from the back door, didn't it? Keep going, keep going. It's all politics, politics. I want to catch that about that storm. I knew that whenever they had done what they done over in Ukraine, that was going to cause a ripple effect, just like I'm having to shut down that embassy over there. It's become too risky. Because you have to ask the question:
It's quite incredible.
Is it saber rattling, or is this time the real deal? I mean, you really can't afford.
In combat roles. I asked Secretary Austin about that very.
You can't afford not to take somebody like Putin serious.
Women in these combat roles, like the ones that you mentioned when you were serving in Iraq. Do you have any concern that women impact readiness of these units?
They do impact readiness. They make us better. They make us stronger. And again, what I've seen from our women is quite incredible. And I'm not. This is not hyperbole. This is fact. I'm just telling you what I've seen. And I think, as the years have gone by, our women get better and stronger.
Secretary Austin defending women in combat, saying that they make the U.S. military better. Anna?
Courtney Kube, a great interview with the Secretary. Thank you for bringing us your reporting. Up next, the TV personality tapped by Trump to oversee Medicare and Medicaid. Reaction to his choice of doctor.
I agree with what the general just said pertaining to that about women. If you have to have a war that's a must situation, the women have so many different advantages over men that it ain't even funny in various levels, on various levels. Keep on. Let's go. I think they're fixing to come up here on the Ukraine deal. On evacuating the embassy. Yep.
Shutting down its embassy in Kyiv overnight, warning of a potential large-scale attack by Russia. The renewed threat follows Ukraine's first strike inside Russian territory with U.S.-supplied long-range weapons, raising fears of Russian retaliation. And after Vladimir Putin formally revised his country's nuclear doctrine, lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. Here's more from Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin reacting to this news in an interview with NBC.
But Putin has also escalated, just announcing that he's lowered the threshold for using nuclear weapons. He announced this right after press reports that the U.S. had authorized ATACMS strikes inside of Russia. Is there a reason to believe that Vladimir Putin may use a nuclear weapon?
We've known for several weeks that they were revamping their policy on the use of nuclear weapons. As I look at what they're doing, and we watch their strategic forces, very carefully, I don't see a change in their strategic force posture. And so we'll continue to remain vigilant in this regard. But at this point, no, I don't see an indication that there's an imminent intent to use nuclear weapons.
NBC News Chief International Correspondent Keir Simmons has more on the latest developments in the region. Keir?
Hey there, good morning. This morning, former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev writing on X that NATO could be targeted with weapons of mass destruction. Now, he has made those threats many times before, but clearly the confrontation between Russia and NATO is escalating. This morning, a serious warning to US embassy staff in Kyiv, just days after Russia launched its largest airstrikes on Ukraine in months. The US embassy closing its doors and telling employees to shelter in place, saying it has specific information of a potential significant air attack in the city today. Overnight, Ukraine's grinding land battle with Russia will be bolstered by more US arms. The Biden administration approving the supply of landmines, a controversial weapon. It's another major US policy shift after the White House allowed Ukraine to use long-range missiles inside of Russia, a move President Biden long resisted. Ukraine quickly firing 6 US missiles across the Russian border for the first time. Moscow saying it intercepted 5 of the missiles and firing back with a message unmistakably directed at Ukraine and the US, saying it may now use nuclear weapons if attacked by a non-nuclear country allied with a nuclear state. Russia's foreign minister at the G20 summit in Brazil.
We are strongly in favor of doing everything not to allow nuclear war to happen.
NBC's Courtney Kuby speaking overnight with Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at a summit in Laos.
No, I don't see an indication that there's an imminent intent to use nuclear weapons.
President Zelensky asked last night by Fox News what would happen if the new Trump administration cuts funding to Ukraine.
If they will cut, I think we will lose. Of course, anyway, we will stay, we will fight.
Now, supplying landmines to Ukraine suggests a determination to hold the battle lines where they are until President-elect Trump arrives. Ukraine has consistently said it would not do a deal with Russia unless Moscow handed back Ukrainian territory.
Keir Simmons, thank you. Up next, closing arguments right now in the trial for the murder of Laken Riley. We're live from the courthouse. Plus, it's a case that shocked the nation 30 years ago. A mother drowning her own children. Could a parole board set Susan Smith free?
Wow. That was a horrifying event. And now today, we hear of horrifying events that's just as bad, if not worse than that.
So everyone was very interested to see why the defense was going to be putting Diego on the stand, but it turned out that he never took the stand, and that's because his lawyer in a separate immigration case told him not to do so.
Okay. So we're just about at the end here. Hang on.
When Susan Smith will
back up. Let's get all this. A lot of people don't know this. So the young ones.
expect from this hearing.
Anna, good morning to you.
It's a parole hearing. Trying to get her out of jail after 30 years of her committing such a heinous crime.
A story that really stunned the nation, as you mentioned, 30 years ago, and now Susan Smith is back in the spotlight. She is...
Let me see, 30 years, that'd be in 1994, was whenever that occurred. Going on back a pretty good ways. That was back whenever I was working in Milan, Tennessee, before I wound up going up to Jackson and working 10 years for Steve Hardy there in Jackson, Tennessee.
Will be appearing virtually in front of a parole board, and these members were appointed by the governor. Right now, we have heard from 6 cases, so 6 inmates, because they also have their parole hearing as well, but it's unclear when Susan Smith will be up. We do know that her defense attorney will be speaking virtually, so will her brother. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, her ex-husband, David Smith, we actually saw him earlier this morning walking into the courtroom, and he had a chance to sit down with our Craig Melvin ahead of today, and here's more from that conversation. Take a listen.
What scares me is that she would get out and then running into her somewhere.
Why does that worry you?
'Cause I don't want to see her. I don't ever want to have to face her. Greg, God gives us free will, and that was her choice that night. Nobody else's choice. Nobody made it for her. She made the choice to murder Michael Adams.
And Anna, as of Monday, more than 400 people actually wrote into the state of South Carolina regarding this parole hearing, and only 6 were in favor of her release. We should also point out that the likelihood of her being released pretty low, because here in the state of South Carolina, only 8% of violent offenders are released and granted their parole, and if she is denied today, she will be able to reapply again in 2 years. On him.
You can still hear the pain in that voice 30 years later, in that father's voice. Thank you very much, Kathy Park. Next on Ana Cabrera reports, postponed but not forgotten. New York prosecutors say they're open to putting Donald Trump's hush money sentencing on hold for the 4 years he's president. Will the judge agree? And later, the bomb cyclone and atmospheric river delivering a nasty wallop of fierce winds and heavy rain to the Pacific Northwest, where this 1-2 punch of dangerous weather is headed next.
All right, let's see. Whenever they say next, then they'll feed 15 other things in between there. Whenever they say next, it don't mean just right next, does it? Here you go.
We have breaking news right now in Donald Trump's criminal hush money case. Just moments ago, Trump's team filing a new motion calling to dismiss it, citing presidential immunity and his victory in the 2024 election. Now, that comes one day after Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg told the court sentencing should be postponed while the appeals process plays out, potentially even postponed until after Trump's second term in office. Judge Juan Merchan would need to approve this proposal. It's all uncharted territory, as this country has never before had a president-elect facing a criminal sentencing. Joining us now, MSNBC contributor and former U.S. Attorney Chuck Rosenberg and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, what more?
This just goes to show you about the 2-tier system that even Donald Trump was against. This just goes to show you, this is just my opinion, that if you're the right person with the right type of clout, even though you've committed a heinous crime or even a bad crime, maybe not a heinous crime, but a bad crime, you basically get a slap on the wrist and get to go free. Depending upon who you are, what position in life that you hold, what state that you're in, and how bad that they really want you. Or you could be somebody like myself, trying to do the good things, but being persecuted because of trying to do the good things, that they're willing to throw the book at if I even so much as dot the wrong I or cross the wrong T. And I think any true born-again Christ-following Christian can admit to the same things towards them being persecuted illegitimately here in America. So can you only imagine what happens to the people in other countries that's true born-again believing Christians? A lot of them get executed just because of their faith. Purely, merely just because of their faith in Christ.
At all. The New York District Attorney's Office telling Judge Merchan yesterday they oppose that and want the conviction to stand. In the letter that they've sent to Judge Merchan this morning, they're putting a little bit more meat on the bones as to why they believe that the case should be dismissed, citing not only the Supreme Court's presidential immunity decision, but also noting that according to Department of Justice policy, a sitting president can't be prosecuted, and for the same reasons that animate that policy, those principles should be extended to a president in transition.
You can't, what was the word that I heard the other day? You can't distract a president of the United States while he is a president in that regard. And if he was going to court day after day after day, like we've seen him doing in New York, after his first presidency, it would be nothing but a big distraction. And because of the immunity policies, now it's a catch-22 with the law pertaining to the courts. And now basically they're going to have to eat crow because of the position that now the re-elected president stands in. Like I said, it was Donald Trump and his committee that brought up about the two-tier system, which once more validates the very things that they were supposed to be fighting up against, pertaining to draining the swamp, trying to stop these privileges from happening to various people, that now he's going to have the opportunity of taking advantage of. So whenever you get to looking at the American laws pertaining to justice for all, you really have a tendency of wondering, well, is it really justice for all? Or is it based upon opportunity? Is it based upon privilege? Is it based upon unfortunate versus fortunate? In other words, if you're fortunate enough that you got a pocket full of cash and you can hire a Johnny Cochran, the next thing you know, you can get off of open murder, kind of like O.J. Simpson did. I'm just using him for an example. That if you got the money, if the glove does not fit, the courts must acquit. So many people have been burnt, hurt, abused, and taken advantage of by the American system. And I took notice of it, not just with Homeland Security pertaining to Secret Service, that operates in a secretive type way. But I got to noticing it throughout the events that I went through up in Kentucky. I started noticing it with the events that I've went through here in the state of Tennessee. I've started noticing it with the events that happened to me out in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, as well as some of the minor events that I went through out in downtown Atlanta, or the surrounding metro Atlanta area, regarding not necessarily what that you've done, but who was it that done it. And if you was the right person, you get basically a slap on the back of the hand. But if you're the wrong person, and they're already gouging to get you to begin with, wanting you to walk the plank, then they'll basically stick it to you just because you made one little boo-boo. Just because you got caught jaywalking. Kind of like what happened to me up in Nashville, Tennessee, whenever they decided to not only have court once, but have court twice. And then after the court procedure happened twice, and there was not nobody representing the warrant regarding a rabbi that I supposedly had offended in one of their Jewish sanctuaries up in Nashville, Tennessee, the judge looked at me and said, well, I'm not going to release this. I'm going to put it on the bottom burner. I'm going to put it on a shelf. And Mr. Jackson, if you so much as even get caught jaywalking, I'm going to combine both these charges together, and we're coming after you, and we're going to make your life miserable. Now that is the fact that I can prove regarding going to Davidson County, living in Knoxville, Tennessee, going to court twice, and basically the judge, rather than him dismissing the charge that he should have done, he hung on to it, which I think was an illegal act by the state of Tennessee. So these Yahoo back alley, backwoods courts basically does whatever that they want to do to whoever that they want to do it to, or whoever that they feel like that they can do it and get away with it, regardless whether you're O.J. Simpson, regardless whether you're this one or that one or that one or this one. The system is not fair. It not only is a 2-tier system, but I think it's a 3-tier system based upon that if you don't have no money, you're sure enough screwed, because then they'll basically do to you as they see fit. And to think that myself was pulled away from the state of Oklahoma, working a job, making $2,000 a week on average, had already rented out a 3-bedroom home, and drugged me back to Trigg County, Kentucky, over 2 non-threatening telephone calls that was supposed to have been on a federal scale pertaining to the events that happened in LBL, but then downsized those charges to a state charge, and I wound up spending almost a whole year in jail over 2 non-threatening telephone calls. Pretty much so speaks volumes. Proof is in the pudding that even the first public defender, which was Wildesworth, my public defender out of Louisville, Kentucky, that I think would be able to look and assess that case and say that there's no way in hell that Mr. Jackson should have been arrested, drugged all the way back to the state of Kentucky in Trigg County in front of Judge Woodall, and then ordered to be put on Risperdal. That made him gain from 240 to 340 in less than 5 or 6 weeks, and then let me get the right word right. Obesity pertaining to being overweight even increased to the point that it caused him to have diabetes too, and then later in life, because of the weight, because of an old injury, he had to go back and have his left ankle fused because of the unnecessary weight that was causing between the leg bone and the ankle bone and the foot bone that was so painful that he had to basically go back and have that operated on. This is what the state of Kentucky done to Dennis James Jackson, born March 22nd, 1961, myself, known as Juby, that was up in the Land Between the Lakes area praying and fasting for peace and a revival for mankind. This is what they do to people pertaining to persecuting them for trying to do the right things. Just like Al Gore. I've used Al Gore many times as an example. Al Gore was trying to help society. He wasn't just trying to help the American society, but he was trying to help the world in general by by raising a red flag to the point of the environmental crisis, global warming, that now we're seeing escalate on levels unimaginable that Al Gore was trying to prevent the world of running off into. And now we have intentionally, not blindly, we have intentionally put ourselves in harm's way pertaining to the forces of nature. It's not just the appearance of it being a 2 or a 3-tier system. It is a 2 and a 3-tier system based upon who you are and why they're trying to get you. The system is evil, the system is broken, and the system needs to be overhauled. I don't think the system is repairable, especially whenever you get to looking at $35+ trillion in debt, and all these politicians that get into power and want to turn it into a career job and are out of touch with reality pertaining to the needs and the wants of the people that put them in power to begin with, that I think eventually God will put an end to it. Because we have seen God put an end to other cultures and other governments that have been this unjust, regardless whether it was Rome, regardless whether it was Sodom and Gomorrah, regardless whether it was the old world of the flood or the world before that regarding the primitive dinosaur era. We have seen God intervene in likeness in the defense of the innocent. And whenever he puts his foot down, you'll know it, pertaining to being cast off into great tribulation. We are knocking on the door every day on this planet of being thrown off into great tribulation. And the more that we see the injustices happening in America, and the more that we see the injustices happening in Russia, and the injustices happening over in the Middle East, and the injustices happening in other parts of the world, the closer that we're getting towards the doomsday. The end of the world. The end of the ages as we know it. And that's the reason why Christ tried to warn his people again and again and again through his teachings of telling us that these things was going to get bad, to flee into the mountains, and that as we shall see the days approaching, that even no flesh shall be saved, but for the elect's sake whom he has chosen, that those days would in fact be shortened. That those days would in fact be shortened.
That essentially the person...
Let's go a little forward here now regarding all this pertaining to this storm brewing. We already know what all this is going to be said and talked about pertaining to Donald Trump. We've already heard it before. Let's see what they're talking about pertaining to this Pacific storm, because I didn't know that was right here. Well, it only caught a blink of it.
Knocked out to more than 500,000 customers in the
Let's back it up. Hope right there.
key U.S. alliance. Next here on Ana Cabrera reports, power knocked out to more than 500,000 customers in the Pacific Northwest, where the combo of a bomb cyclone and atmospheric river is wreaking havoc.
See, I didn't know that was going on. That's what happens whenever you stay busy doing stuff around the yard and making broadcasts of other things, concentrating on other stuff in your life. That's what happens. You tend to lose touch of the other things that's going on. You can't keep up with everything. It's hard to keep up with everything. I'm just a one-man show. Just a one-man pony show here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255, regarding the Windmill Ministries missions. I'm just a one-man pony show, so sometimes I have a tendency of missing something that is going on, even as big as a major storm. Let's listen.
Of people are waking up without power this morning in the Northwest, where a bomb cyclone and atmospheric river are drenching the region, bringing strong winds and growing concerns of flooding and landslides. NBC's Steve Patterson's tracking the latest from Eureka, California, where there's a high risk of flash flooding. What are you seeing so far, Steve?
Yeah, Anna, thankfully, mercifully, we're in a bit of a lull here in Northern California. The rain has slowed significantly, but that bomb cyclone has already dropped, so to speak. As you mentioned, it's uprooted trees, it's down power lines, and as this continues, the danger only grows larger across the Northwest. Overnight, hurricane-force winds packing powerful gusts up to 80 miles an hour, wreaking havoc across the Northwest. The so-called bomb cyclone taking aim late Tuesday.
Oh my God.
Knocking out power to more than 500,000 people in Northern California, Washington, and Oregon.
This is my street. It's literally fully dark.
Fire and rescue teams in Washington responding to down power lines and trees. One woman killed when a large tree fell on a homeless encampment, and 2 people were taken to the hospital after a tree fell on their trailer. While in California, an atmospheric river, a large plume of moisture, drenched the coast, while turning to snow in the mountains.
It's going to bring some significant precipitation to portions of Northern California. We're talking rainfall totals 10 to 20 inches possible, with feet of snow, several feet of snow in the highest terrain. This is likely to result in significant flash flooding and landslides.
The storm system, one of the strongest to hit the West Coast in decades, is expected to last through Friday.
We got flashlights, batteries, water, canned goods. You know, I'm all stocked up. Because who knows, right? These are small roads, anything can happen.
So the wind, the rain already doing significant amounts of damage, the storm already turning deadly, but the real threat is in the sustained rainfall over the next few days, especially if this stuff gets out over a burn scar. It could significantly increase the risk of a severe mudslide and, of course, flooding, always a concern in city centers. Anna?
Steve Patterson, thank you. We hope everybody there stays safe. And that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Same time, same place. For now, I'm...
You know, I took notice of a storm probably about 4 years ago, maybe 5, up around the Great Lakes, of how that it had affected the severity of the storm, because the Great Lakes had not yet frozen, and the storm basically come over the Great Lakes and started building and building, drawing moisture from the lake because the lake hadn't frozen over. And then whenever it did snow, it come a freaking snow like you couldn't believe up there in Wisconsin, in places that I guess had as much as, if I'm not mistaken, about 10 foot of snow. So whenever you get to looking at these deluges that happen during the summertime, this can also have a profound effect upon the people's lives in the wintertime, depending upon where you are. Now, if I'm not mistaken, last year, which this is an indication of it, last year, up in the Rocky Mountains, there was people that got basically 15 to 20 foot of snow, that even some of their major big snowmobiles couldn't keep the roads clear and go in there and help these people. So whenever you get to looking at the rain comes from moisture. Well, it don't matter if it's summertime moisture or wintertime moisture, it's going to be harsh upon humanity. This is the reason why the Bible says, woe be unto the inhabitants here upon to the earth, whenever you shall start to see these things occurring. We are the inhabitants. The people on the planet are the inhabitants. And the Bible has warned us for the past 2,000 years, especially since the book of Revelations has come about and been put into the reading material, since King James brought all those books together, that these are all upcoming events that, because of these delay tactics that has delayed the second coming of Christ, we have to look forward to, because of various people that was dead set that they wanted to stop the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions from ever succeeding in accomplishing what God had called him to accomplish. Now you can take that for what it's worth regarding what I just said, but I'm telling you right now, society over here in the Western world has created something that they really don't have no idea in what that they have created in using these delay tactics, because we could have already been basically raptured out of all this stuff, but because we're still here, we're going to have to deal with all this stuff. Good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our troops. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. And heaven, God Almighty, please help us all. Shalom.